Hello everyone and welcome back to the action window. Today we're looking at Psyker and one of the strongest builds you can possibly run on her. Psyker is a class that's seen a lot of buffs recently and as a result is in a really good spot now. Despite that, the class has a high skill floor to get in on and can be a painful learning experience, with some players preferring to avoid it completely. As I've said before in a previous video, the Psyker is a powerful generalist, where your value to the team comes from applying your multifaceted toolset to where it is needed most at any given moment. In other words, the key skills you need to really get the most out of this class are observation and adaptation. Being able to recognize various threats as they present themselves and switch seamlessly from one role to another is where the Psyker truly shines. Whether it's being a horde decimator, a special sniper, an elite controller, or a melee powerhouse, you really can do it all. The build I have for you all today really is the epitome of that philosophy. For this build, we're running the Trauma Staff and the new Deimos Sword, with our feats set up primarily to maximize value from the staff, but also to enhance the capabilities of our Sword and Brain Burst as well. Firstly, I'll talk about the staff itself. Unlike most of the videos I make on weapons, where I talk about this breakpoint versus that target, the Trauma Staff is built a little differently. Our sole objective with this weapon is to chain cast the blue circle as many times in a row as humanly possible. In order to do that, we need a staff with good modifiers. Every single modifier bar on this weapon is relevant, but in order of priority, we want damage and charge time. And then on the next tier, we've got warp resistance and blast radius. And finally, the least important is quell speed. It's really best to try and start with a 365 plus base rating staff for this, so you get as many points into these bars as possible. It really does matter with this weapon, and it can feel pretty lackluster at the lower end of the rating scale. This is because the Trauma Staff doesn't really have a dump stat. Even quell speed, which is the least important, is still important to have above 60% because you'll often be quelling from 100% to 0% with this staff, and the less downtime you have on that, the better. So fair warning, if you're going to pursue getting an excellent Trauma Staff, you really have to hit the white whale of RNG from Brunt and his stupid fucking slot machine armory. Perks are not the end-all be-all with this weapon, as we will be running Warp Battery and Kinetic Barrage in this build, which means we'll be spending a lot of time at max stacks of Warp Charge for the full 24% damage boost, which handily checks off most breakpoints you could possibly want. That having been said, I do think Unarmored and Carapace probably offer the most value here. 20 to 25% versus Unarmored will net you a one-shot breakpoint on a full charge blast to both the Dreg Bruiser and Shooter without any stacks of Warp Charge, whilst at the other end of the damage spectrum, 25% versus Carapace plus maximum stacks of Warp Charge will remove 99.9% of a Crusher's HP in 4 blasts. It may even be possible to hit that 4-shot breakpoint versus the Crusher with a perfect damage roll staff, but sadly I couldn't test this as I ran out of money on my Psyker. Either way, this staff is arguably the best weapon in the game at dealing with packs of roaming Crushers, with only the Surge Staff really competing against it, and even then, the Surge Staff does not have the width of application that the Trauma Staff does. Blessings are what's really important here. Very specifically, Warp Flurry, which you will want a level 3 plus version of. At max stacks of Warp Flurry, your charge time for Blue Circle will be reduced by 40 to 50% depending on the blessing tier, with each subsequent stack charging your Blue Circle faster than the last. You literally only need to just keep holding right click in order to achieve this. It doesn't matter how long you hold the Blue Circle for before you release it. The Warp Flurry blessing will work as long as you immediately start charging another Blue Circle after you do that. Damage and charge speed is just one half of the equation though. The other half is sustainability. And what I mean by that is how long we are able to cast Blue Circles for before we are interrupted or have to stop. After all, what good is building max stacks of Warp Flurry if we have to stop casting Blue Circles before we really get a chance to leverage that faster cast time? The key to getting value from this weapon is chaining together as many fully charged Blue Circles as possible, and in order to do that we need to think about our toughness regeneration and our peril resistance. As chain casting blue circles is essentially an aggressive style of play, you will 100% want warp absorption on the level 5 row. This allows you to take toughness chip damage while you cast, as your blue circle kills will be regenerating it, a very useful property, especially when it comes to dealing with clustered groups of shooter enemies. The second and perhaps most crucial talent is Inner Tranquility, which gives you 6% peril resist per warp charge. While you might be tempted to take the damage boost from Warp Unleashed, this will actually lower your damage over time, as you will not be able to cast as many full charges of Blue Circle, and you will also not be able to cap out and get value on maximum Warp Flurry stacks. Running Inner Tranquility also demands that we run Warp Battery to give us more stacks of peril resistance, essentially allowing us to cast more blue circles. This also has the added benefit of giving us more damage across all our abilities too, and this is important for hitting a range of breakpoints across both our weapons. As for the other 3 talents, Psychic Communion is optimal, as passively generating warp charges means we can spend less time brain bursting to keep our 6 charges up and more time casting blue circle. Kinetic Deflection is maybe the best Psyker talent going, offering amazing defense in its synergy with block efficiency perks and the Deflector Blessing, as well as freeing up your stamina for pushes and sprints. Finally, Kinetic Barrage is the best choice for this build on the 30 row, as our weakness is long range and having a fast and peril efficient brain burst offsets that nicely. It also is the only ultimate that doesn't flush all your warp charges, which is something you really want to avoid doing in this build. Another crucial piece of the puzzle comes from the Psyker's innate passive ability, Battle Meditation. The objective with the Trauma Staff is maximizing your chance of triggering this passive as much as possible, which we can do with a combination of the Warp Flurry Blessing and our chosen feats. Don't be afraid to push the limit with your Trauma Staff, especially if your ultimate is off cooldown. Sometimes you can hit 100% peril on a blue circle cast and get lucky with a Battle Meditation proc, taking you back below 100% peril instead of blowing you up. And if you do start to blow, you have your ultimate ready and waiting. If the Trauma Staff serves as this build's hammer, then the Deimos Foresword serves as both its scalpel and its shield. Before we talk numbers here, let's first talk function. This sword possesses 2 animations within its moveset that deal insane single target damage. These are the first light attack and the second heavy attack. Both of these animations are thrusts, making them both quick and exceedingly accurate attacks. The light attack thrust can one-shot headshot any trash enemy in the game, with the exception of the Dreg Bruiser at 0 warp charges, and even he goes down in one with 2 to 3 warp charges depending on the sword in question. The heavy thrust is similarly impressive, being able to one-shot headshot the Chaos Hound without needing a special charge. However, it is with the charge special that this sword truly becomes the best special enemy killer in the game, making even the likes of the Thunderhammer and the Chain Axe seem like slow, unwieldy pieces of crap. Without any buffs or perks at all, the Force Charge Light Thrust can one-shot headshot every special enemy in the game, save the Trapper, who requires a force-charged heavy attack to the head, and the Mutie, who requires 25% versus Maniacs and 5 warp charges to hit the one-shot headshot with a force-charged heavy attack. The Unarmored Rager dies to a single force-charged heavy attack shot with 20% versus Maniacs and 4 warp charges, while versus the Flak Armored Rager, buffs are not even required. A single force-charged heavy attack to the body or head will kill it in one. The Mauler goes down to a single force-charged heavy attack to the body at 4 warp charges, and finally, the Crusher dies to 2 force-charged heavy attacks to the head, but in order to achieve this you will need 25% versus Carapace and 6 warp charges. Full disclaimer here, to hit all those breakpoints, you will need damage, finesse, and first target modifiers all up in the high 70s, with my recommended perks to chase on this weapon unsurprisingly being damage versus Maniacs and damage versus Carapace. Although, block efficiency and stamina are actually fine here as well, as the 2-shot Crusher breakpoint is really not that important. Moving over to the next exceptional quality of this sword, and all 4 swords actually, now I think about it, it has infinite dodge. That's right, there is absolutely no limit to how many times you can dodge with this sword, which means between that, the kinetic deflection feat, and the deflector blessing, There's no situation you can't extract yourself from. Simply throw up your block, face the threat, and crab scuttle away like Zoidberg. The sky is really the limit with abusing this technique, so give it a try. You'll be surprised what you can survive. As I just mentioned Deflector there, we'll quickly go over blessings. Deflector is obviously the GOAT, as any tier of it will give you missile block, with higher tiers giving you more block efficiency. Well worth it if you can get your hands on a higher tier version, because the aforementioned synergy between kinetic deflection and block efficiency is really strong. As for the second blessing, it doesn't really matter at all. Slaughterer is probably the strongest by merit of it just being the best damage blessing, but as you will be rarely using this sword to clear chaff and the like, it's not essential. As long as you have damage versus maniacs and deflector on the Deimos with the right rolls in the relevant modifiers, you'll be just fine. Finally, we'll wrap up this build guide with a quick look at Curios. As usual, I recommend running as much toughness as possible to tank shooter hits. I wouldn't recommend plus HP blessings here, as the Psyker is super squishy and you really shouldn't be getting hit in melee anyway, especially considering the defensive capabilities of this class. Perk-wise, combat ability regeneration and block efficiency are my preferred choices. With combat ability regeneration stacked to 10 to 12%, you can get 3 seconds off kinetic barrage, and that will save your life on occasion. Plus, having it come back faster to get more utility out of it is great value. Block efficiency I already mentioned, and as for the third perk slot, you can't really go wrong with either health, toughness regen, or stamina regen. So all the usual suspects that you'd want anyway. That's going to be it for this build guide, guys. Next time, I'll have some gameplay footage coming in for you, so you can see what this build can do in the flesh, rather than just listening to me tell you about how great it is for 12 minutes. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.